Fix old cameras. Your successful completion of the demonstrated repair ultimately depends on the quality of your tools, the condition of your camera, and most importantly, your repair ability.
The Leica M3 might be one of the finest user cameras ever made, and it should be used, not just set on a shelf and looked at. So if you come across one that's a little rough, like this one, with a broken prism in the rangefinder, that's perfect for a DIY repair. There are some specialty flexi clamps available that you might want to get to reduce the likelihood of marring the tricky to remove retainer rings of the M3 camera. Remove the bottom cover so as to access the rewind fork to lock the rewind shaft to remove the rewind knob. The pin face for the rewind knob retainer is very shallow, so be careful that you don't allow the spanner wrench to slip out of the holes. With the retainer removed, as you lift the rewind knob free, watch for the shouldered washer that sits inside the knob. With the properly sized slotted screwdriver, remove the screw on the shutter speed dial. It does not matter where the shutter speed dial is set. The 4 screws of the accessory shoe can be removed with the same screwdriver. Underneath the accessory shoe will be a pressure foot, and underneath the pressure foot will be a spring plate. Now comes the tricky part of removing several retaining rings. The chrome on the Leica camera is soft and easily marred, so great care needs to be taken. But remember, this is a user camera. If you put a little nick in it, it's not going to affect how well the camera operates. Finish the ring removal off with your fingers wherever you can. Don't lose the spring washer. Set aside the spring washer and the advance lever. Now there's another retainer ring revealed. It too has very shallow notches. Seeping isopropyl alcohol around it and the other retainers will aid in their removal. You can make a tool that perfectly fits these notches to remove this, or with a great deal of care you can use an adjustable pair of spanner wrenches. Offsetting the spanner tips sometimes allows the tips to grip better. Once the retainer ring is loose, it can be worked out the remainder of threads with the tip of a curved tweezers. Usually with strong pressure on the viewfinder glass, it can be threaded out with your fingertips. Next come the sync socket retainer rings. Sometimes the ring will come free of the sync socket, other times the sync socket and the retainer ring will come out as one unit. On this one, the retainer ring came free of the sync socket. However, on the next one, the sync socket and the retainer ring came out as a unit. That is actually a good thing because the sync socket still has to be removed. You can use a small pair of locking pliers in conjunction with a cloth to protect the threads from being marred. Now the retainer around the rewind shaft needs to be removed. This one came off fairly easy, but they can be very stubborn at times. There is a lot of lore around the purpose of the black wax that covers the final screw that needs to be removed to get the top cover off. At this time, removing the rangefinder access screw is only optional. As you try to remove the top cover, the edges of the holes for the sync socket will catch on the center post of the sync sockets. They need to be pushed back so that the top cover will clear that and not catch and bend those as you lift the top cover off. Remove the 2 screws of the rangefinder prism retainer bracket. Sometimes those little screws, they just don't want to cooperate and you have to chase them around. Persistence paid. Now we need to work to get the broken prism glass out of the rangefinder. Wow, it's amazing that the impact that broke this prism did not also break the viewfinder glass. Without the aid of trick photography, you will need a donor. This prism was taken from a camera that got extremely wet and was ruined from a standpoint of corrosion. Although the prism is not perfect, it's far better than the smashed one. When the prism is properly seated, the retainer will easily slide into position. The top cover will need to be reset so that the rangefinder can be tested. Oops, the top cover is bent just enough that it is not wanting to go back on right. We'll have to try to bend the eyepiece out just a little bit. The top cover is made of chrome-plated brass. It's soft and the threads could be easily damaged. Care needs to be taken. Looks good. Should go. Try again. And as you put the top cover on, watch for the protruding center post of the sink sockets. Good. The threads weren't damaged in our straightening attempt. Now install the accessory shoe spring plate, the pressure foot, and the accessory shoe. 4 screws of the accessory shoe and tighten. Note, the screws are easily twisted off. Do not over tighten. Seat and align the shutter speed dial, and again, do not over tighten the screw. The slotted retainer ring around the advance lever post can be tricky to start. Be sure that it's not cross-threaded before you begin to tighten with the spanner wrench. Again, note the offset position of the spanner tips in the hope of creating better control of the spanner wrench. Seat the advance lever in place, then the advance lever spring, and then the advance lever retainer. Thumb tighten, making sure that it's not cross-threaded, and then snug down with the flexi clamp. Go ahead and wind it a couple of times and give it a test. No reason why it shouldn't work, but just to make sure. Install the sink socket and retainer. Remember, in this particular case, one of the sink sockets separated from the retainer. The sink sockets are easier to install with the retainer and the sink socket as a unit. Then, as a flexi clamp is used to tighten the retainer, the sink socket will also turn, and eventually it will bottom out and the retainer will tighten. Now we have the fun of the tricky little rewind shaft retainer ring. It is so easy to cross thread, so easy to bend. You just need to take your time and take care and finger tighten till it's just snug. If you don't have a flexi clamp, finish off with gentle pressure from a pair of locking pliers, protecting the jaws with a piece of cloth. Phew, no marks. Now we'll just seat the rewind knob as it drops down into place, and then we'll put the lock washer with the prongs down, and then we can finally seat the retainer. Remember that the pin face on these are very shallow, and great care needs to be taken that when you're using the spanner wrench that they don't slip from the holes and then put a nasty mar across the pretty chrome plating of the rewind knob. Well, we'll just as go ahead and put the screw in the lens mount that sits right underneath the rangefinder window. If the split image position didn't need any adjustment or has already been adjusted, you can install the rangefinder adjustment access cover screw. You can use black wax or substitute a quality black crayon to fill the head of the screw on the lens mount. Because of Leica's reputation, it might be a little intimidating to tackle a repair on the M3. However, that's no reason for a user not to maintain a camera that they intend on shooting some pictures with. If it's just going to sit on the shelf as a collector, maybe you want a professional to do it. Otherwise, go for it yourself.
Thank you for watching. Inspired? Check back for new video postings.